Welcome back and thanks for clicking on the video. I'm so glad you came back, especially after I basically slammed you all last session for spending more time staring at your screens than your kids do. Not exactly the way to win you all over, but you're here today, and that confirms what I figured when I chose to do this series. Helping our kids navigate this world of technology is a big deal for us. Now, before we press on, I want to go back and review the analogy that I gave you concerning technology in the last video. We talked about how a smartphone, or any technology, is a lot like a knife. It's neither inherently evil nor inherently good. A knife can be used for some very productive things. Cutting bread, spreading butter, whittling. It can also be used for some very destructive things, like slashing tires or even murder. The value is determined by the user and his or her ability to discern proper and productive usage. Let's carry out the analogy a little bit further. There are lots of different types of knives. Butter, bread, steak, and pocket, just to name a few. Some of the knives are much less risky to be misused or inflict damage in any other way. Others can serve a good purpose, but they can also cause major damage. And then there are some that just seem like it's tough to find a positive use for, like this one. There's a correlation here to the world of technology and our teens, especially in the world of social media and apps. There are a ton of options out there. They vary in their intended purpose. Some pose little to no risk in their usage. Others, and I'd argue most, could be used in a healthy manner, but they contain plenty of opportunities to inflict spiritual and emotional damage on both the users and others. Then, there are a few out there that I believe you can't come up with really any legitimate argument or redemptive value in. The key is figuring out how to know which is which. When it comes to talking to parents about technology, I am most often approached with two questions. The first, what is out there that we need to know about? And the second, what type of filters or controls are available? I have some good news and some bad news. The good news is that we're going to spend the rest of our time talking through these two questions. However, I don't know that I'll be able to give you the answers that you hope to receive. I have a feeling many of you who jumped into this video was hoping that I'd be able to walk through all of these different knives that are out there and let you know whether or not your kids should be using them. I'm sorry to tell you that this is an impossible task. You know, the Apple Store alone has over 3 million apps available as of the end of 2019, and they add an average of 1,000 apps a day. In 2019, the App Store offered 903,489 gaming apps, and just over 3.06 non-gaming apps. And as of June 2017, over 180 billion, that's billion with a B, apps have been downloaded. There's also the tricky reality that what is popular or cool can literally change overnight. So I'm not going to be able to cover all of that in this session. Instead, I'd like to take a step back from the trees and look at the forest of technology and give you some key things that I think you should know in order to navigate this technological frontier in a God-honoring way. First, you should know the social media platforms. We use this phrase social media or social networks when talking technology, but let's make sure we all understand what we're talking about with that phrase. Webster's definition of social media is forms of electronic communication, such as websites for social networking and microblogging, through which users create online communities to share information, ideas, personal messages, and other content such as videos. This social media is the digital playground where our kids are living, playing, suffering, and building up their identity. So you need to know the platforms your kids are getting on and how exactly they all work. Now, I consider taking time to walk through each of these platforms and how they work, but the reality is many of you already know them because you're on them yourselves. Instead, I'll let you know about some great places to go on your own time and learn a bit more on anything you feel in the dark over. Instead, let me just walk through what I believe are the most popular social media platforms in our student ministry right now. The big three are Instagram, Snapchat, and TikTok. If I went up to two students and asked which is more popular among their peers, I'd get one of these three as the answer. It's basically a toss-up. This is where the majority of our students are living, posting, liking, sharing, commenting, posting stories, and keeping streaks alive. For those who may not be familiar with TikTok specifically, the non-traditional social media app is often referred to as a lip-syncing app, which makes it kind of sound like an online karaoke experience. But a closer comparison would be Vine, Twitter's sorely missed short-form video app, whose content lives on in YouTube compilations. While it's true that TikTok is home to some standard lip syncing, it's actually better known for its act-out memes backed by music and other sound clips which endlessly get reproduced and remixed by its young users. TikTok hit the market back in September of 2017. It's been downloaded more than 1.5 billion times, has 500 active monthly users. The average user spends 52 minutes per day on TikTok. 90% of users use TikTok at least once a day. And the 50 most popular users on TikTok have almost 500 million followers. Fourth is YouTube. You may not think of YouTube as a social network site, but it definitely is. Most of our students simply use it as a spot to watch content. YouTube has its own set of celebrities who are enormously popular with teenagers. A few examples are Rhett and Link, Dude Perfect, PewDiePie, and Logan Paul. Some are fun, clean, and quite enjoyable. I personally like Dude Perfect and Rhett and Link. Some are a little more questionable and explicit. Ask your kids what YouTube channels they like watching, or go in and see what they're watching. A much further fit is Twitter. Some students have accounts to just follow different personalities or post sporadically, but it has been losing popularity in the past couple of years. Then, a long-distant sixth is Facebook. It ranks so low mainly because parents and grandparents are the main demographic using it. Again, I would encourage you to be aware of which platforms your kids are using, become students of those platforms, and engage in conversation with your students on how they're using those various platforms. The second thing I want to encourage you to do is know your child's games. This is a big one. You most likely bought them their gaming system, but do you know what they're playing and how they're going about it? Most games are now a social network in amongst themselves. You make a profile and avatar and jump online to play with or against others from literally all around the world. With a good headset, you can actually converse with others while playing. This doesn't just happen on an Xbox, PlayStation, and Nintendo Switch. It can also happen on your smartphone. Right now, Fortnite is still popular among students. It's what's called a battle royale shooter game. Basically, you take a character with no weapons and jump into a map looking for weapons and resources to fight opponents and build protection. While the game is free to play, there's a battle pass for purchase with each season, which lasts 10 weeks and gives you additional cosmetic items for your character in-game. Other video game companies have jumped on the bandwagon and have put out their own free-to-play battle royales with battle passes. Some of these include Apex Legends, Call of Duty Warzone, and PUBG, just to name a few. Other popular video games include Roblox, an online game platform which has over 200 million customized game types, as well as Minecraft, the creative world-building game. When it comes to any games your kids are involved in, I would just encourage you to take 3 things into consideration. First, content. You need to pay attention to the ratings on your games. Do a simple Google search on the names of the games your kids are playing and see what you can learn, or check out sites like pluggedin.com for information on the content. Secondly, consistency. Pay attention to how much they're playing each game. Do they play it every day? And when they log on, how long do they play for? And thirdly, connections. Most games are multiplayer. Be aware of who your kids are playing with and what their interactions are like. Third, you need to know where your children are going digitally. Look, there is so much stuff out there. Streaming services like Netflix, Hulu, Disney+, and YouTube TV and Spotify have changed the game. I'm not necessarily saying you need to know every single show out there, but there are a couple of things I would encourage you to consider. Know how to track what they're reading, watching, and listening to, and what sites they're visiting. I can share with you some tools by message if you aren't sure how to do this. Let your kids know that you'll be checking in on what they're reading, watching, listening to, and what sites they're visiting. Now, opinions vary on what level of snooping parents should do on their kids, but the reality is you've purchased that device, that streaming service, and that data or internet connection that he or she is using, so you could definitely reserve the right to check in on how it's being used. At the same time, don't think so much about control as much as you do accountability. Know what's popular or trending is the next thing that's important. Whether it's a book, an artist, a show, or a movie, be aware of what's really popular among teen culture or your teen's peers, as it'll likely become something your student will consider engaging in. For example, in the spring of 2016, the show 13 Reasons Why hit Netflix, with multiple seasons coming out years after. This teen drama dove bluntly, graphically, and with little to no gospel framework into some very heavy topics, which included bullying, sexual assault, school violence, and suicide. If you didn't know about it, you most likely missed out on A, something your kid may have watched that may not have been healthy for them to watch, B, an opportunity to bring the gospel filter into engagement in the show, whether your kids watched it or were just a part of discussions about it, which I can guarantee they were. The fourth thing you need to do is you need to know where to go so that you can know. If you aren't a little overwhelmed and annoyed with me by now, I'm shocked. I'm asking you to know a lot of stuff on top of everything else that you have on your plate. That has got to be overwhelming. And I've done very little to help you figure out how to gain the knowledge on these things. So let me address your annoyance and give you a few resources to help you out. One resource that's good is smartsocial.com. This site is not a faith-based site. Instead, their goal is to help parents and kids understand how important leaving a healthy social footprint is for teens when it comes to shaping their future for education like college, as well as their professional careers. It's especially focused on social media. I want you to particularly pay attention to their parent app guide. On this page, they list some of the most popular apps, categorize them as green, safe knives, gray, knives that parents should be monitoring and involved in, and red, knives for teens and tweens to stay away from. They also offer brief videos explaining the apps and how they work. Okay, on to two more sites that can be resources for you. Next is iParent.tv. This site has somewhat similar layout to Smart Social. However, this one is run by Greg Gross, the founder of XXX Church, and gives some great faith-focused advice, but it expands a bit on what it covers to include apps, social media, popular websites, as well as devices. Next is PluggedIn.com. In my opinion, this site from Focus on the Family is the closest you can come to a one-stop shop for parents who want to be educated on entertainment media, like movies, music, TVs, games, and books. It provides content overviews as well as faith-based reviews for parents. So there's a flyover on the question of what's out there. Now, I'd like to address the other question that I'm sure is present in your mind. What type of filters or controls are out there and available? Again, I'm not sure how pleased you might be with my answer to this one, and that is that filters aren't the answer. Now, here's what I mean. First, there's almost always a way around parental filters or controls. If someone wants to get to content bad enough, he or she can almost certainly find it. Second, no filter can 100% block out questionable, inappropriate, or graphic content. It may still find your kids. Third, and maybe most importantly, there will come a day when your child grows up and will be free from filters and controls. If they have not learned ways to show restraint and wisdom before this point, it could get really ugly really fast. I know of a person who worked as the resident director at a Christian college. He said that every year his IT department would show him a giant spike in the number of students visiting pornographic websites in the first weeks at college. Now, even as I say all that, there's still no question. There's a space for filters and parental controls. Although you can't block everything, blocking some can be valuable. You need to train them to navigate a digital world on their own, but there can be space for some restrictions depending on the age of your son or daughter. Remember our knife illustration. So, first up is parental controls. Almost every smartphone allows you to set up some levels of parental controls so that you can limit access to apps and content. Rather than walking through tutorials for each one, I'm just going to point you towards a very helpful article from Parents Magazine, which walks through multiple devices and how to set up controls for parents. Just type in tinyurl.com/show-me-parental-controls and it'll take you to the article. I've also linked the article in the description down below. Back when the internet started, filters were all the rage. You could download some software onto your computer and set different restrictions, which would then block any websites that contain that content. However, with the addition of mobile phones and devices, it's gotten a lot more complicated. One device some use is Circle by Disney. It's a device that you plug into your home internet. Here's what it advertises that it can do. Customize and filter for each family member. Pause internet at the press of a button. Set daily time limits for sites and apps. Set a bedtime for devices, as well as see the usage for each family member. Many internet providers, phone carriers, and router companies boast about additional apps, products, and features that they provide doing much of the same as well. so be sure to check in with yours and see what they provide. I've covered a lot of ground with you in this session, and although my answers to the 2 big questions may feel incomplete, I do hope that they've given you some direction. The bottom line is that there is no magic bullet, or should I say knife, out there that will relieve you of your responsibilities. Honestly, I think it's a good and God-given thing. I'm going to get to why I think that in our next session. Thanks again for clicking on the video and joining us today. Remember to go through the workbook I posted with last week's video. And be sure to do some research as you wait for Lesson 3 to come out next week. Until then, know that I'm praying for you and your family, and know that I hope you have an awesome day.